Hello crafty friends, welcome to today's video. I often get asked about the card or the paper that I use for stamping and blending and things and smushing, and quite often I'll use mixed media paper and people say to me, well, what is mixed media paper? It's just a really robust paper that can handle lots of different media. You can stamp on it, blend on it, smush on it, paint on it, splat on it, all sorts of things, and it won't fall apart. It's a bit like watercolour paper. It's designed to take lots of different types of media, including very wet media. I also often get asked which is the whitest paper to do certain techniques on, because a lot of mixed media watercolour type papers tend to be creamy. So I've got some different white cards here and I'm going to test them with the various techniques. So the first one I've got is the Tim Holtz watercolour cardstock. It is very white, it's textured on one side and smooth on the other, and the packaging says you can use both sides. This is the De La Rowney mixed media paper that I use. It is white, not quite as white as the Tim Holtz paper, but it is a pretty good white. And again, you can use both sides. This is a piece of watercolour paper from a pad that I picked up at Flying Tiger. It was inexpensive and I thought, well, let's test it with the others. It does say that it is acid free, so it shouldn't yellow in the light or change the colour of the things that you use on it, but I don't know anything else about it. There's no more details on the packaging. And this is just a piece of regular white cardstock. So I cut some squares out of the cards, each ran 3 by 3 inches, and then I took one of each card and patchworked them together to make one piece with each of the different types of card on. So I've got the De La Rowney, the Tim Holtz, the smooth white card and the Flying Tiger, and that's the same on all of these. So I can now test 4 techniques. For my first technique, I'm going to do some smushing. So that's a bit of Peacock Feathers Distress Oxide. I've got my smusher here and I'm going to smush it on to all the different corners of the card. I'm going to give that a blast with my hairdryer. So there we go, they all look pretty good. And now for some shaded lilac on top. So for some simple smushing, I would say they are all very comparable. I can't see a difference at all between them. I will though flip it over and do the reverse. So this is the reverse side. I would say the De La Rowney and the Tim Holtz look pretty much the same front and back. The Flying Tiger, there are some darker areas, and this is where there's probably no coating, no sizing on the back of the paper, and the ink is soaked in. So that's fine, that's a look, but it's definitely got a front and a back, I think. And the back of the smooth white cardstock looks pretty much the same as well. So they're all pretty much of the same quality, I think, when it comes to smushing. Now I want to test these with Catherine Pooler inks. This is Pink Champagne, a red from the Spa collection. I re-inked this the other day, so it's pretty juicy. So all I'm going to do to start with is just press, oh, see, it's very juicy. Press the ink pad down to like really saturate the paper with ink. I think I over-inked this ink pad, but it was very, very dry and I wasn't quite sure how much to add. And the next thing I want to see is how well this ink blends on the card. So that's the De La Rowney, the Tim Holtz, the Smooth and the Flying Tiger. And I think I'll do a different colour as well, a slightly less juicy ink pad. This is quite dry. So this is It's a Boy, blue from the Party collection. So I can build up quite a nice blend on the De La Rowney and Tim Holtz. I always find this smooth white cardstock isn't great for blending the Catherine Pooler inks. They seem to need that sizing you have with watercolour or mixed media paper, stops them soaking in too quick. And then this is the Flying Tiger. And I'm going to set this aside to dry before we pass judgment, because sometimes these inks need a little while to smooth themselves out, so I think it's only fair to do that. I think you can already see that the Daler Rowney, that ink is not soaking into that as fast as it's soaked into these others, but we will see what it looks like. Next, I'm going to do some stamping. I've got a photopolymer stamp here, and I'm going to stamp it in Tuxedo, Memento Tuxedo Black. And then I'm going to stamp it in embossing ink so we can clear emboss over the. So here we have 4 images stamped in black ink, then stamped in embossing ink, and then clear heat embossed. This one, the smooth white card image, is by far the crispest and cleanest and darkest. Well, maybe not darkest, I think that one looks darker, but they're all really good. So now I'm going to see how well these will watercolour with some inks. So that's a bit of abandoned coral distress oxide, and I will do this big flower. I'll cover it in the abandoned coral. Then drop in a bit of scattered straw. So it's stayed wet long enough for me to do a wet on wet technique of dropping some colour into the abandoned coral. So that's good. I'm going to do exactly the same thing now to the other ones, the other papers, and then we'll try some Catherine Pooler inks. So I would say the Tim Holtz paper is very similar to the Daler Rowney in that I could do wet on wet very easily. I would say the smooth white cardstock absorbs the paint a bit faster, but it still looks fine to me. And the Flying Tiger paper looks pretty good too. All 4 papers allowed me to do wet on wet over this small area. I think if I was painting something bigger, I might struggle to get a good blend on the smooth white card because areas of it would dry faster than others. So now I'm going to do one of the other flowers, but use Coral Cabana dye ink from Catherine Pooler and Tiara. Both of these are Party Collection inks. So the smooth white cardstock is really sucking this ink in quickly, and I don't think it's going to give me a particularly nice finish. I've not been particularly delicate with that or accurate. I was just trying to see if I could do a wet and wet technique, and I think it's worked on all of them. Probably my least favourite is the smooth white card, the plain cardstock. That's not surprising really, it's not meant for watercolouring on. The Flying Tiger doesn't look brilliant, especially with the dye ink, but the Daler Rowney and the Tim Holtz look pretty good. I'm just going to flip these over and paint on the back of each one just to see what the back side's like. So on the back of the papers, not getting much blending or re-wetting with the smooth white card, getting those funny blotchy bits with the Flying Tiger, because obviously I think the back hasn't been sized in the same way the front has. The Tim Holtz and the Daler Rowney look very similar. I was able to re-wet and blend and lift with both of those, as you might expect with mixed media / watercolour paper that claims to be usable on both sides. So I've got a stencil here. I've just sprayed it with stick and spray to make it sticky. So that's about right. So I'll stick that over there. I've got some Salty Ocean Distress Oxide here, and I'm going to blend it on. Now I'm going to rub it with this just to get a bit of the blue off the stencil. And I've got some shimmer spray here. I've given it a good shake and I'm going to spray it over this, move everything else out of the way. I'm just going to pick up some of the excess spray because that came out in quite an interesting fashion. I'm going to pop this over the top, press it down, just to pick some up, and then I can always use this for something else. There we go, that looks pretty cool. They all look very similar. Even with the stick and spray, there's quite a bit of seepage under the stencil because this has got quite a powerful squirt on it, and there was a lot of puddling, so it oozed under the stencil, but that's okay. They all have the same treatment, so we can call it a fair test. The stenciling, the blue stenciling looks absolutely fine, much the same on all of them, and the shimmer spray has done much the same thing to all of them too. Right, let's look at all of them then. This still hasn't soaked into the Daler Rowney, and I think that's probably because that was the first one that I squished onto there, and it got more ink than the rest. With the Smushing, I think they behaved very similarly. Although the Flying Tiger, I think, has a different effect on the back because the sizing isn't as complete on the back. With the Catherine Pooler inks that I smushed down and blended, you get quite a different look, I think. On the smooth white card, it's quite pastel-y. This looks quite different from this. And this Flying Tiger one's a bit darker still. So you get a much lighter look on the smooth white card. The blending looks good on all of them, although you tend to pick up a bit more of the texture on this Flying Tiger one, but that might be something you want for a particular project. With the watercolouring, I think the Daler Rowney and the Tim Holtz do win when it comes to wet on wet, although the white smooth cardstock wins, I think, in terms of stamping in black and then heat embossing. And with this stenciling, blending through a stencil and spritzing, they all perform much the same. So personally, I will always have smooth white card to hand because I use that for all sorts of techniques. So that's something I will always buy. And when it comes to Daler Rowney and Tim Holtz, the Tim Holtz and Daler Rowney perform very similarly. The Tim Holtz is slightly whiter than the Daler Rowney, but if we look at price, I think the Daler Rowney works out as better value for money, so I won't be investing in the Tim Holtz. I think I'll stick with my Daler Rowney, and I won't be buying any more of the Flying Tiger, but I will use the rest of it up on a variety of projects, I think. So I hope that's been a helpful insight into some of the white papers that are available to us as crafters. If there are any other techniques you want me to test with these 4 papers, then let me know in the comments and I can do an extra video where I test those techniques. And I think that about wraps it up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.